Close your eyes, put your headphone, and feel the fear. It was a few summers back, late August, when the heat still clung to the highways like tar. I had booked myself a Greyhound ticket because flying was out of my budget, and driving alone across states wasn't something I trusted myself to do. That bus ride was supposed to be just another forgettable stretch of time, cramped seats, stale air, and the constant rattle of the road. But it turned out to be the most unforgettable trip of my life. We pulled out of Chicago just after dusk. The windows were dirty enough that the city lights smeared into long orange streaks as we rolled past them. People were settling in, mothers with restless kids, a man in a work jacket who already had his hat pulled low, two college girls whispering and laughing, and then there was him, the old man. He got on at the last moment, moving slow, hunched, carrying a long duffel bag that looked heavy enough to break his spine. It wasn't military green or sporty, but old leather, cracked and almost black with age. He didn't meet anyone's eye, just shuffled past with that bag dragging behind him. He sat 3 rows ahead of me, aisle seat, like he wanted to keep anyone from sitting too close. At first, I thought nothing of it. Just another drifter, maybe homeless, maybe one of those Vietnam vets you see sometimes who never quite came back whole. But the longer I sat there, the more I noticed how nobody else wanted to be near him either. People shifted in their seats when he walked past. Even the kids got quiet. It was like his presence pressed the air flat. An hour down the road, the lights inside the bus dimmed. The countryside outside was just blackness broken by the occasional farmhouse light, the road cutting straight through the dark. That was when I heard it for the first time. A faint scraping sound. I leaned into the aisle, looking forward. The old man hadn't moved, but his bag, it was shifting, like something inside had rolled or pressed against the leather. I figured maybe it was bottles clinking or tools. But then I saw his hand. It wasn't resting on the bag, it was pressed flat against it, like he was holding whatever was inside still. His head was turned toward the window, but the reflection in the glass showed his face. And though the rest of the bus was nearly asleep, his eyes were wide open, staring, not out the window but at me. I sank back into my seat, heart thudding. Maybe I imagined it, maybe the glass distorted it. But the scraping noise came again, soft, steady, like nails on the inside of that bag. We pulled into a truck stop around midnight, one of those half-lit places with vending machines, grimy bathrooms, and a smell of burnt coffee hanging in the air. People shuffled out to stretch their legs. I stayed near the bus, smoking a cigarette I'd been saving, and that's when I noticed the old man didn't get off. He just sat there, bag at his feet, staring straight ahead. Everyone else had stepped away, even the driver. For a moment it was just me outside and him inside, visible through the smeared window. And I swear on everything that bag moved on its own. It bulged outward, like something inside was pushing hard to get free. The old man jerked forward and slammed his hand down on it, hard, and the bulge sank back. I dropped my cigarette without finishing it. Couldn't look anymore. I told myself I was tired, seeing things, my eyes playing tricks. When we all climbed back on, I made damn sure to take a seat further away. But it didn't matter. The scraping came back, louder this time, dragging along the floor. A woman across the aisle stirred, glanced down, then quickly looked away. Nobody wanted to acknowledge it. Nobody wanted to be the first to admit something was wrong. The bus rolled deeper into the night. The smell hit next. Not strong, just faint, but enough to notice. Metallic, like rust or blood. And then, sometime around 3 in the morning, the lights flickered. Just once, but long enough that I saw something I can never unsee. The old man had turned fully in his seat. His eyes were on me again, but his mouth was open wider than it should have been. Not like a yawn, like a grin forced too wide, stretching the skin. and his hand, that liver-spotted, trembling hand, wasn't holding the bag anymore. It was stroking it, slowly, almost lovingly. I shut my eyes, pretended to sleep, but the scraping kept on, louder, closer, like whatever was in that bag was no longer content staying put. And here's the part that chills me most, the part one can't explain. By the time dawn broke and the bus rolled into the next city, the old man was gone. His seat empty, no bag, no trace he'd ever been there. But the aisle carpet, it was torn. Long, thin gouges in the fabric, running right past my row. By the time the bus rolled into St. Louis, I was a wreck. My neck ached from pretending to sleep. My eyes felt like they were burning, and my stomach wouldn't stop twisting. I didn't want to look down at the aisle where those gouges ran, but I kept catching myself glancing at them anyway, like my brain was forcing me to check if they were still there. And they were. Long, thin tears as if a dog with razor claws had paced right past my seat in the night. Nobody else seemed to notice, or maybe they noticed and chose not to. The woman across the aisle had gathered her things the moment the bus hissed to a stop. The two college girls who'd been whispering and laughing the night before were dead silent now, eyes glued to their phones as if those glowing screens were life preservers in a storm. Nobody talked about the old man. Nobody asked where he went. It was like our brains had all agreed it was better not to ask. I stepped off the bus into humid morning air that smelled of diesel and cheap coffee. My legs were unsteady, but it felt good to be away from that seat, from that aisle, from that smell. I told myself I'd book a cheap motel, sleep off the night, and catch another bus tomorrow. The Greyhound station wasn't in the best part of town. You could tell from the shuttered storefronts, the cracked sidewalks, the way the payphones had their cords ripped out. I walked 2 blocks until I found a squat little roadside motel with a faded neon sign that read "Sleep Easy." One of the letters was out, so it just glowed "Sleep Sigh" in sickly red light. The lobby smelled like old carpet cleaner. The clerk barely looked up from his newspaper when I slid my ID across. "One night," I muttered. He handed me a brass key attached to a chunk of wood, room 14, end of the row. The room wasn't terrible. A bed that sagged in the middle, curtains that didn't quite meet in the middle, a TV bolted to the dresser. I dropped my bag and locked the door, double-checked it, then shoved the dresser an inch in front of it for good measure. I lay down but couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the old man's reflection in the bus window, those eyes staring back at me while his hand stroked the bag. I kept telling myself he was gone, I was safe, it was just an old crazy man. But my ears wouldn't let it go, because after about an hour of silence, I heard it. Scrape, soft, almost delicate, like a fingernail dragging across fabric. I froze, blood rushing in my ears. It was coming from the window. Slowly I turned my head. The curtains were shut tight, but they trembled. Something was moving against them from the outside. Scrape, long, slow, deliberate. I forced myself up, inching toward the window, heart hammering. I wanted to fling the curtain back, tell myself it was a branch or a stray cat or the wind. My fingers pinched the fabric, and then the scraping stopped. Silence. I waited, holding my breath. 10 seconds, 20, a full minute, nothing. Finally, with a shaking hand, I pulled the curtain open. Just the parking lot, empty asphalt under buzzing yellow lights. A pickup truck parked 2 rows over, the neon sign flickering, nothing else. I let out a shaky laugh. My nerves were wrecked, that was all. Maybe the air conditioner had rattled the curtain. Maybe then I saw it on the glass itself. 4 long scratches etched into the pane. So fresh they still glittered like tiny diamonds where the glass had split. I stumbled back, tripped over the chair, nearly fell. My throat was tight, breath stuck somewhere between a scream and a sob. And that's when I smelled it again. Metallic, rust and blood, faint but unmistakable. seeping into the room though the window was shut, the door locked. The smell of the bag. I pressed myself against the wall, shaking, staring at those fresh scratches. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually exhaustion won. I curled up on top of the bedspread, shoes still on, staring at the door, at the window, waiting for the next scrape. It never came. But when morning light finally filled the room, I saw something else. Something I swear hadn't been there the night before. On the inside of the glass, a handprint, small, too small for a man's, pressed in the dust and grime of the window, as if something had leaned in from the other side, even though the glass had been closed tight all night. I didn't even bother showering. I grabbed my bag, left the key on the nightstand, and walked straight out into the morning heat. My whole body buzzed with the kind of jittery exhaustion that makes you feel half drunk. The motel clerk glanced up when I passed the office, like he expected me to say something, but I kept walking. What was I supposed to say? Hey, something scratched my window last night, and now there's a child's handprint inside the glass. No, I just needed to get on the road, away from that room, away from the smell. The Greyhound station was 3 blocks away. On the way there, I passed a diner with a faded sign shaped like a coffee cup I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, and my stomach was a knot, but the idea of hot food sounded almost human. I pushed the door open. A bell jingled, and the smell of grease and burnt coffee hit me. A couple of truckers sat at the counter, their baseball caps tilted low. A waitress in a yellow uniform wiped down a booth near the window. She looked up at me, froze for just a second too long, then forced a smile. Sit anywhere you like. I slid into a booth. My hands were still shaking, so I folded them under the table. When she came over with a menu, I noticed she was studying me, not in a curious way, in a wary, measuring way, like a doctor deciding whether to tell a patient the truth. You from out of town? She asked. Just passing through, I muttered. She poured coffee, set it down. Her hand lingered on the pot. Then she lowered her voice. You didn't stay over at the Sleep Easy, did you? The words caught me so hard I nearly spilled the cup. I looked up sharply, searching her face. She knew. Somehow she knew. Why? I asked. Her mouth tightened. She glanced toward the truckers, then back at me. Folks say that place ain't right. Been stories for years. People hearing things at night. Windows scratched up. One fella swore he woke up and his kid's handprint was on the glass. My blood turned to ice. You ever hear about an old man? I asked before I could stop myself. On the buses? Carries a bag? Her eyes went wide. She shook her head fast, too fast. Don't talk about him. Not in here. Something in the way she said it, like speaking the words themselves, was dangerous, rooted me to the booth. My throat was dry, my palms slick. She straightened, forced a brighter tone. What can I get ya? Eggs, pancakes? I couldn't answer. The clatter of dishes, the scrape of forks, the hum of the overhead lights all seemed too loud. My pulse thundered in my ears. Finally I muttered, just toast. When she left, I looked out the window, desperate to anchor myself in something normal. Cars passed, sunlight flashed on windshields, a kid rode by on a bike. Normal, ordinary, and then I saw him. Across the street, half hidden by a telephone pole. The old man, same hunched posture, same greasy coat. The bag dangling from his hand, my breath caught. He was just standing there. Not moving, not waving, not crossing the street. Just watching. I blinked, and for a second the sunlight glared off the glass, blinding me. When I squinted again, he was gone. The waitress brought my toast. I barely touched it. By the time I paid and left, my legs felt like they didn't belong to me. Back at the station, I bought a ticket west. Didn't care where, just west, away. The waiting room buzzed with chatter and shuffling feet. But every time the door creaked open, I felt a jolt of panic. I scanned faces, looking for him, certain he would shuffle in at any moment with that bag swinging at his side. When the bus finally came, I nearly ran to board. The driver tore my ticket, didn't look twice at me. I found a seat near the back, shoved my bag under the chair, and pressed my forehead to the glass. As the bus rumbled out of the city, I saw the motel one last time in the distance, its neon sign flickering sleep-so-eye in the morning sun. And for just a split second, standing in front of room 14 was a figure, not the old man this time, smaller. A child, pale and thin, with one hand raised, as if waving goodbye. The bus hummed along the interstate, the steady thrum of the tires on asphalt lulling some passengers into sleep. I couldn't close my eyes. Every time my lids grew heavy, I saw the child outside the motel, the pale hand pressed to the air like glass. I told myself it was exhaustion, hallucinations. That's what people always say when reality bends. You're tired, you're stressed, you're imagining things. But I couldn't explain the waitress's face when I mentioned the old man, or the handprint on the inside of my window, or the way the bag seemed to twitch when he shifted it on his lap. The bus was half full. Across the aisle, a young couple leaned against each other, earbuds sharing music. A heavy-set man snored softly 3 rows up. A woman with a toddler dozed near the front. The world seemed normal again, but my nerves wouldn't loosen. We pulled into a rest stop an hour later, the kind of place that looks the same in every state. Buzzing fluorescent lights, vending machines, a sad little convenience store that sells everything from aspirin to beef jerky. I stepped off, stretching stiff legs. The night air was cooler here, tinged with the smell of pine. For a moment it felt good, grounding. I walked toward the store, thinking maybe a bottle of water would wash the taste of dread from my mouth. Then I saw him. By the edge of the lot, just beyond the pool of light, the old man stood, still the bag dangling from his hand. His face was turned slightly away, but I knew he was waiting. For me, I froze. Passengers milled around me, laughing, smoking, stretching. Nobody seemed to notice him. A car door slammed, headlights cut across the lot, and when I looked back, he was gone. I stumbled inside the store, heart pounding. The kid behind the counter barely looked old enough to drive. He was flipping through a magazine, chewing gum. "You all right, man?" he asked when he saw my face. I tried to answer, but my voice cracked. "You ever see an old guy around here? All coat carries a bag?" The kid blinked. His gum slowed. Then he shook his head quick, like the waitress had. "Don't know what you're talking about." He did. I could tell by the way he avoided my eyes, by the sudden stiffness in his shoulders. They all knew. Everyone I asked looked away, changed the subject, pretended ignorance. Back on the bus, I took my seat and wrapped my arms around myself. The driver climbed aboard, closed the door, and the engine roared to life. As we pulled onto the highway, I glanced out the window one last time. There. At the tree line, just barely caught by the beam of the lot's floodlight, was the old man. Watching, the bag at his side, the bus surged forward, and the night swallowed him. Hours bled together. The rhythm of the ride should have been soothing, but every sound became suspect. The rattle in the ceiling vent, the hiss of brakes, the whisper of fabric as passengers shifted in their seats. I couldn't tell if I was hearing real things or the start of something else, something sliding out of reality's seams. Sometime past midnight, I noticed the couple across the aisle were gone. Their seats empty, no trace they'd ever been there. My stomach dropped. I twisted in my seat, scanning the bus. The woman with the toddler was still up front, the heavy-set man still snoring, but the couple vanished. I waited for someone to say something. Nobody did. Nobody seemed to notice. My mouth went dry. I wanted to stand, to ask the driver, to scream if I had to. But some part of me knew, deep down, that acknowledging it out loud would make it worse. That was the rule here. Don't speak of him. Don't draw him closer. and then from the corner of my eye I saw movement. The aisle, 3 rows back. A shadow stooped with something dragging the floor. I forced myself not to look, not to breathe. But I could hear it, the bag sliding against the grimy linoleum. Coming closer row by row, the bag slid closer. The sound was almost delicate, like fabric brushing a floor, but in the silence of the bus it felt deafening. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat screaming at me to look, just look, but instinct held me frozen. I kept my eyes fixed on the seat ahead. The hum of the road vibrated through the soles of my shoes. Someone coughed near the front. Nothing else moved. Nothing acknowledged what I could hear plain as day. The steady drag of something too heavy for that frail old man to be carrying. It stopped right behind me. The air went cold. Not the kind of chill from an overactive AC vent, but the cold of soil freshly turned, damp and old and full of things that should not rise again. And then, barely audible, came the sound of breathing. Not as breathing, it was too ragged, too wet, like lungs filling with liquid, forcing air through rot. A trembling hand reached for the seat beside me, fingers curled over the headrest. Thin, bone-pale, nails blackened as if they'd been clawing through earth. I snapped my eyes shut. My body shook, every instinct screaming to run. But where would I go? I was trapped in this narrow aisle, this rolling coffin of steel and strangers who weren't strangers anymore. The bus jolted suddenly, swerving hard, brakes screeching. My eyes flew open as people cried out, clutching seats. The hand was gone. The driver cursed under his breath, pulling us onto the shoulder. "Damn dear," he muttered. But when I turned just for a heartbeat, I saw it. The bag sitting alone in the aisle, halfway between rows. As though someone had dropped it. Nobody else reacted. Nobody even looked. The driver got us moving again, grumbling. I stared at the bag. Its canvas was stained darker now, as if something wet had soaked through. A smell drifted up the aisle, iron, sour, and sharp, hitting the back of my throat. Blood. And then the bag twitched. Not a shift from momentum, not a sway with the bus's turns. A sharp, convulsive jerk, like something inside, had slammed itself against the fabric. My breath caught, another twitch, harder. The zipper strained. I couldn't look away. A sound slipped out, low, muffled. A whimper, a child's voice, hoarse with terror. "Help me." The word was so faint I thought it was memory imagination. But the second time it came, it rattled the bones in my chest. "Help me." The toddler at the front stirred, whining in her mother's lap. The mother hushed her, rocking gently, oblivious. No one else moved. No one else heard. I stood. My legs felt made of water, but I stepped into the aisle. The bus rocked around me, lights buzzing overhead. The bag gave another convulsion, harder this time, sliding an inch toward me. I crouched down. My hand hovered above the zipper. Every instinct screamed against it, but I couldn't stop. I had to know. My fingers brushed the metal. Cold, too cold, the zipper slid halfway open. What I saw inside was not possible. Eyes, dozens of them, small, glassy, wet with fear. Children's faces, pressed together in the dark, mouths open in silent screams. Their little hands reached upward, clawing the air, skin gray with a thin film of soil. And beneath them all, barely visible in the shadows, a larger shape moved, slow, deliberate, waiting. I fell back into the seat, gagging, bile rising in my throat. The bag zipped itself shut with a violent jerk, the sound loud enough to make the hairs on my arms stand on end. And then silence. The bus rolled on. Passengers dozed. The mother hummed to her toddler. The driver whistled tunelessly, as if nothing had happened. But when I dared to look again, the bag was gone, and in its place in the empty aisle was the old man, standing, his face turned toward me at last. His eyes were black, not the black of iris or pupil total, void. His mouth twisted into a smile that promised something far worse than death. And then he spoke, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You open the door, now it won't close.